The psychology of the trickster, why the trickster is the key to self-discovery. Have you ever felt like you don't truly fit in, even in a room full of people? It's not because you're sad or shy, but because something inside of you has shifted. You're no longer drawn to shallow conversations, forced smiles, or the empty rhythm of social expectations. Instead, you begin to question, what if everything I thought I knew about myself is an illusion? This is where the trickster appears, at the moments when your beliefs shake, your identity fragments, and emotional chaos takes over. The trickster doesn't offer solutions. Instead, he shatters the false sense of certainty you've been holding on to. In this video, we dive into Carl Jung's concept of the trickster archetype and explore how embracing the chaos within can lead to profound healing and transformation. We'll discover why the trickster is not your enemy, but rather the first step toward reconnecting with your truest self. Get ready to confront your inner shadows and awaken a new kind of freedom, the freedom to be fully you in all your raw, untamed authenticity. He makes you laugh when you should be serious. He makes you speak the truth at the worst possible moment. He whispers things that confuse you, that make you doubt yourself, and sometimes even hate yourself. But that's not a mistake. That's the beginning. Carl Jung once said, "The trickster is a reflection of an undifferentiated consciousness, a place where the human is still fused with their inner darkness," meaning he is the unilluminated part of each of us, not the evil part, but the part that hasn't yet been understood. When you're still living to meet others' expectations, playing social roles, trying to become an ideal self you were taught to be, the trickster is the one who breaks that script. And at a deeper level, he is not just a disruptive symbol, but the first companion on the path of real healing. Because you cannot heal what you have not yet dared to face. You cannot control yourself if you've never conversed with the wild within. You cannot be free until you've been lost and learned how to walk again from the beginning. The trickster's not your enemy, but he isn't comfortable either. He is the warped mirror you must look into to see the deeper truth inside yourself. And only when you stop calling him a problem and start calling him a signal do you truly begin to heal, because no one truly understands what the trickster is until they realize the chaos they were running from was actually a part of their soul screaming to be heard. The earliest instincts, without control, that is the first shape of the trickster. From the earliest years of life, before we have language, before we can distinguish right from wrong or even explain feelings, humans live by instinct. Hunger, curiosity, cries, unconscious laughter, these are immediate reactions to the world. No plans, no control, no boundaries. And that's the very first ground where the trickster is born. Carl Jung referred to this as the pre-ego stage, when we haven't yet formed a distinct self, haven't learned to categorize feelings, and don't know how to behave properly. During this time, the trickster is the embodiment of pure life, free, wild, chaotic, instinctual. He knows no fear, no shame, and is unbound by the moral codes society will later impose. He eats, destroys, breaks, screams, laughs loudly like a child, fully honest with its emotions. In a deeper sense, we all begin life in the shape of the trickster, but then we grow up, we learn to control, to behave, to hide. We learn that some emotions should be masked by a smile, that some reactions should be suppressed. And in that learning process, our original instincts, the trickster part, are pushed into the depths of the unconscious. But the problem is not that we learn control. The problem is when we forget that the wild part is still there, still burning like a quiet flame inside. Every time we suppress real feelings, every time we force ourselves into roles that don't fit, every time we betray what we truly long for, the trickster stirs again. And he doesn't return in a pleasant form. He might show up through destructive behaviors, self-sabotage, sudden outbursts, chaotic relationships, or demolishing what we've tried so hard to build. But these aren't acts of evil. They come from a rawness that hasn't been heard, from a primal instinct that's never been lovingly acknowledged. If you've ever felt like a grown-up child, impulsive emotions, overreactions, self-destructive tendencies without understanding why, then perhaps the trickster is reminding you, remember, I am your origin. The trickster does not come to drag you back to the past. He comes to make sure you never forget your core, your vibrant, honest, untamed self. not yet strangled by expectations, and only when you dare to look back at those uncontrolled instincts, not to suppress them, but to understand them, do you begin the deep healing process, where the wild is no longer rejected, but transformed into inner vitality. When you try to suppress chaos, it becomes the shadow that makes you lose control. There's a deep paradox in human psychology. The more we try to suppress something, the more powerful and dangerous it becomes when it resurfaces in psychoanalysis. This is the very mechanism of the shadow, the unconscious part pushed out of the light of awareness. And the trickster, when rejected, becomes part of that darkness. The trickster is inherently vibrant, mischievous, instinctual, and disobedient to rules. If seen clearly, he can help us reconnect with creativity, truth, and primal inner strength. But when we grow up in a world that demands we be serious, appropriate, mature, the trickster is condemned as irresponsible, rebellious, dangerous. We suppress him, lock him deep in the unconscious where he can't speak, but still lives. Then, as a natural psychological mechanism, what is repressed always finds a way to return, but this time, not through harmless mischief, but through breakdown. You forget what matters, say what you shouldn't, act strangely, erupt in anger, make self-destructive decisions, and don't understand why you think, I'm losing control. But really, it's the trickster suffocated for too long, now fighting to break through at any cost. Carl Jung once wrote, "Anything not brought to consciousness will become fate." The trickster is part of your mind. You may not see him, but that doesn't make him disappear. On the contrary, he'll control you from the shadows through emotions, behaviors, impulses you can't explain. This is when many people mistakenly think, there's something wrong with me. I'm weak. I've failed. But the truth is, you're facing a part of yourself you've never learned how to listen to. The trickster is only dangerous when forgotten, when he is unnamed, misunderstood, not integrated into conscious life. He becomes a destructive force, and the more you try to assert total control, the more you'll be led by the very part you tried to exile. So healing is not about defeating chaos. It's about sitting with it like an old friend and asking, why are you here? And you might be surprised, because the answer is not destruction, but the rescue of a soul part that's been forgotten for too long. When you dare to acknowledge the trickster, not to eliminate him, but to understand him, that's when the darkness inside stops being the enemy. It becomes a map that leads you toward freedom, wholeness, and true inner power. Sometimes even the wrong laugh is a cry from the soul. Have you ever laughed in a moment when you absolutely shouldn't? Maybe at a funeral, in a tense meeting, or just after someone shares something serious. That laugh didn't come from joy. It came from a silent chaos, a feeling trapped between emotion and reason. And if you've ever experienced that moment, chances are the trickster is speaking. The trickster is a master of paradox. He hides in those offbeat moments where emotion and action, norms and instinct fall out of sync. Not because he wants to mock, but because he's cracking open a tiny fissure where truth might leak through. Carl Jung once said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining light, but by making the darkness conscious." That sudden laugh, that irrational act, that's the whisper of darkness, not to shame you, but to make you pause and look deeper. In ancient cultures, the trickster wasn't just a disruptor, but a bearer of sacred laughter. In ancient Greece, Dionysus, the god of wine, madness, and festivals, was seen as a symbol of breaking all structure. Through laughter, people were temporarily released from roles, from rituals, from the serious self that society demanded. Laughter, through the trickster's eyes, is not cheap amusement, it is a ritual of liberation. And when you begin noticing your odd reactions, laughter in grief, relief when things collapse, a strange calm when you abandon what's safe, you'll see a part of you is trying to save you. From confinement, from pretending, from outdated psychological structures. The trickster doesn't destroy to diminish you. He creates cracks, sometimes with laughter, sometimes with mistakes, so you can see beyond the mask. And it's in those moments we consider weak, inappropriate, immature, that real life emerges. We've been taught to see mistakes as failures, offbeat behavior as flaws, laughter at the wrong time as immaturity. But if you look deeper, you'll realize those are the moments your soul can no longer bear to perform. Laughter, even misplaced, might be a door into a new depth. And the trickster, with all his cunning, is simply trying to help you see yourself more honestly, more freely, more humanly, because sometimes the wrong laugh isn't a lack of awareness, it's the expression of a pain no one ever dared to name. He doesn't destroy out of selfishness, but because he cannot bear pretense in societies obsessed with appearances, where everyone nods in agreement out of fear of exclusion. A single question from the trickster, short and irreverent, can shake the whole system, really. That very defiance is what gets him labeled dangerous. But for the same reason, he becomes a symbol of radical honesty, even if the cost is exile. On a deeper level, the trickster reminds us, no system is perfect, no rule eternal. If a belief suffocates you, if a principle demands that you deny yourself, then perhaps you are living in an illusion, and the trickster's chaos is your warning sign. That's why philosophers, artists, poets, the ones who always question the norm, often carry the trickster's spirit within them, not to rebel against everything, but to ensure that truth is not smothered by manufactured peace. The trickster does not come to destroy all you believe in. He comes to ask, do you really believe that, or are you just repeating what others want to hear? In a world increasingly homogenized and guided by image, the trickster is the final reminder that awakening doesn't come from flawless compliance, but from daring to question what you've been told is normal. Don't be too quick to condemn chaos. It may be a symbol rising from your unconscious. We are often taught to be stable, rational, in control, and anything that deviates from these standards, a strange behavior, an unusual thought, an overreaction, is quickly labeled negative, dangerous, even abnormal. But what we're rarely taught is that some things appear in our psyche, not to destroy us, but to help us see what we've never understood. The trickster is one such symbol. When you lash out for no reason, laugh off beat, repeat the same mistake, or have bizarre dreams, you're not wrong. That is a call from the depths of your unconscious, not just from your wounds, but from a wisdom yet unnamed. So when a part of your life feels chaotic through behavior, emotion, or even thoughts that leave you confused, don't rush to judge it. Step back and ask, what is this trying to tell me? It may be the creativity you abandoned out of fear of judgment. It may be the protest of an inner child long silenced and never heard. Or it may be the trickster reminding you, you cannot live authentically while constantly fleeing your truest self. The trickster is chaos with memory instinct, waiting patiently to be released in a healthy way. He does not break you, he knocks on your inner door, not to make you lose control, but to help you restore connection with your deepest parts. So instead of condemning the chaos, learn to speak with it, because in every storm, if you learn to listen, you may find a symbol not of breakdown, but an invitation to begin the journey of self-understanding from within. In Western alchemy, there is a figure called Mercurius, seen as the trickster's representation in the inner transformation process. Mercurius is a strange being, both antidote and poison, both soul and substance, both angel and deceiver. He shapeshifts. Moving between worlds heaven, earth, and the underworld, he is the living symbol of what cannot be defined, the part of the self still waiting to be integrated. If your healing journey is all light, it's an illusion. If it's all logic and no instinct, it's fragmentation. The trickster enters like a saboteur, but in truth, he is showing you that the part of your soul you once called a problem is actually the key to transformation. Alchemy doesn't happen out there. It happens within, and the trickster, with all his chaos, is the one who leads you through yourself until you discover that the gold was never in your hands, but in the self that has been remade. The trickster despises that pretense, not out of envy or hatred, but because he sees the lie the ego won't admit. He refuses to let us live forever in an idealized image. He destroys what we built from pride. He exposes us through mistakes, embarrassment, and loss of control to return us to what's real, the raw, human part of us that doesn't need anyone's approval to be worthy. When the ego inflates, we fall into one of two states. Either we try to control everything, or we panic at the loss of admiration. That's when the trickster appears ruthless. He makes you fail just when you thought you couldn't. He makes you stumble right when you want to prove yourself. He bursts the bubble that protects you from the truth. You are not perfect, and you don't need to be. It may seem cruel, but look closer, and you'll see a strange form of love, because without the collapse of the ego, many would spend their whole lives in a beautiful but hollow shell, never knowing who they really are, never connecting with emotion, never living authentically, never finding the peace that only raw self-honesty can bring. The trickster doesn't come to humiliate you. He comes to free you from the ideal version of yourself that has become a burden. He comes to pull you out of the world of roles, where you must be better, nicer, more correct every day, but only feel more lost, empty, and disconnected from who you really are. The trickster's ruthlessness is actually a shock therapy aid jolt that pulls you back into the present, where you are no longer someone in the eyes of others, but simply a human being learning to be honest with yourself. And if you're brave enough not to resist, you'll see, beneath the ego's dust, lies a tender but authentic self, alive, vulnerable, and worthy of love. So whenever you feel you've lost face, lost your image, or lost control, don't be so quick to call it failure. It might just be the trickster breaking what no longer serves you, giving you a chance to return to the deeper self you lost along the way. The shadow is not what's frightening. What's frightening is that you've never dared to face it. Within every person lies a part that is unspoken, unacknowledged, and unwelcome. It is the dwelling place of envy, anger, desire, wounds, doubt, weakness, all the things society labels as bad, out of control, needing to be fixed. Carl Jung called this the shadow, and if we do not face it, it continues to control our lives from the dark. The trickster lives between the light and the dark, and no one understands the shadow better than he does. While the ego tries to paint a beautiful image to gain society's approval, the trickster constantly pulls you back to the truth that there is a part of you that you've never wanted to see. And in that very rejected part, the shadow is where the key to healing and inner maturity resides. The trickster doesn't create the shadow, he reflects it. He is the strange mirror where you don't see your best self, but the hidden one, and for that reason many fear him. They label him a troublemaker, a saboteur, while in truth, he is simply helping you see what you've buried too deep. In reality, the shadow does not demand that you change entirely. It only asks to be acknowledged. When you dare to sit with it, listen to it as a part of your soul once abandoned, you'll see that beneath the anger is unhealed pain. Beneath the envy is a forgotten longing, and hidden in the shame is a child once denied love. The shadow is not dangerous. Your refusal to dialogue with it is. He will not hand you the key unless you're ready to shed the persona you've worn for years. He won't open the way unless you're willing to fall into not knowing who you are, what's coming, or what to believe. He will test you, not with external obstacles, but with inner chaos, where you're forced to pause and ask, do I have the courage to move forward without the illusions I once clung to? The trickster represents nonlinearity, the cycle of breaking and renewal, while society demands constant forward motion, productivity, success. Control. The trickster reminds us, all spiritual evolution begins in disorder. No one awakens from within the comfort zone. No one finds their true self while still believing they must always be right, always okay, always strong. The fear of losing your way, falling apart, or losing yourself is in fact a sign you're approaching the threshold of transformation. And even if you try to return to the old path, something within will whisper, is this really all I am? That whisper is the trickster's call. In the individuation process Jung described, the trickster reveals the soul's inner opposites, good and evil, reason and instinct, ideals and wounds. Only by recognizing and integrating these seemingly opposing fragments can you pass through the chaos and reach a state of wholeness, no longer split between outer persona and inner soul. But no one crosses this threshold with perfection. You pass through with humility, with the admission that you don't know, that you have limits, that what you once called failure may actually be a call from within. The trickster is the last figure you meet before the page turns, not because he blocks the path, but because he wants to know, are you willing to let go of what's false to find what's real? If your answer is yes, the door opens not to ease but to truth, and the real journey begins only from there. You don't need to eliminate chaos. You need to learn to dialogue with it through compassion. For much of life, we are taught how to control ourselves, master our emotions, overcome fear, and erase weakness. But rarely are we taught how to sit and listen to the chaos within us. When we lose control, our first instinct is often to correct, suppress, or deny rather than ask, "What is this chaos trying to tell me?" The trickster doesn't need you to defeat him. He just needs you to stop labeling him as the problem. He is a message, not a threat. When you stop seeing your inner chaos as the enemy, you begin to see the wisdom hidden in the disorder, fear tied to unhealed pain, anger masking helplessness, impulsiveness emerging from unheard parts of the soul. The compassion you need now isn't for others, it's for the unstable parts within you. This isn't surrender, it's a gentle form of wisdom where you accept that you don't need to be perfect to be worthy of healing. You don't need to control everything to be strong sometimes. Just sitting with the chaos without running away is already a great evolutionary step. When you no longer fear, the trickster, you will understand what true wholeness means. We often imagine peace as the absence of conflict, mistakes, or chaos. But that's an illusion. True peace does not come from removing the ugly parts of yourself. It comes when you can embrace all that you are, light and shadow alike. The trickster, the one who once confused you, disrupted the image you tried so hard to protect, is no longer an enemy. He is the one who shattered the illusion, the guide toward truth. And when you no longer wish to escape him, you also stop fleeing from yourself. Wholeness is not the same as perfection. Wholeness is knowing you can be wrong, weak, chaotic, and still be worthy of love and authenticity. It's when you no longer need to perform, to prove, or to pretend to be someone else. When you've integrated the trickster, you don't just heal, you begin to live with a new kind of freedom, freedom within your own soul. And that is the most solid foundation for love, creativity, and presence with depth, with grace, and with humanity. This path has no finish line and no fixed map, but it is the true path where you no longer have to pretend to be strong or fake being lovable, where every inner part, even those once rejected, has a name, a voice, and a place in your healing. And if the trickster teaches you anything, it is this: wholeness does not come from conquering chaos, but from walking into it and still holding your heart intact.